member and friend artists of all ages and experiences.
Let me go.
Yes. Hi, everyone. This is AnySquared Spotlight. And tonight we have a treat. We have Amie Sell with us, who is a longtime AnySquared friend, and we've collaborated with her on so many projects, including the longtime project that we've been doing with her at Art in the Park at Unity Park. She is a curator. She's an artist. She's a sculptor. She does installations, and she's going to talk about all the things that she does, and she has a lot of skills and things that she does in the world. And we're excited to have her talk and, have one of our very longtime friends on here for our spotlight. So Amie, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm super honored to be here today. I'm going to share my screen. I'm gonna talk and show a whole bunch of pictures, and there'll be a Q&A at the end. So, but if you really want to ask something, just interrupt. And if I'm talking too much, somebody to send me a signal of some sort. All right. So some of you may know me from the Hearts and Minds show. That's one of the first shows that I did with you all at AnySquared. Look at all our lovely faces. I know some of you are in the background right now. And this is a piece that I did, sculptural piece. I think it was called something like The Longest Journey. So it's like from your heart to your mind, that old kind of saying. And you could sit on the brain. That was the fun part about it. This is kind of when I started to use a little more string in my work and trying to just bring a little more fun and interactivity into it. And then the lip show was in that with all of you at the Hairpin Art Center. And unfortunately, it got a little derailed by the pandemic, but I think we've all made the best of it. We're all here right now. This is the piece that I submitted to all of you, and then I built on site. It was the first time I ever built something this large with paper mache and fabric, so it was really fun.
I love that piece.
It was fun. I wasn't very happy with the overall shape at the end. There's things that I will do different, and I'm always like this with my work. I'm a perfectionist sometimes. Next time will be better, but you can see all the joy that people had in it. It was really fun because you could see this little can you see my cursor at all? No? Yeah, you can. Okay, so you can see this little thing here. It turns the light on and off. So then people could, activate the light themselves. And when you looked up into it, there's this beautiful chandelier of all these little parts. So it was kind of this idea of being inside of a bud, ready to open and blossom. And the hairpin has long been a part of my career. And you can see an installation that I did in this background here. You can't see it very well in the dark. Unfortunately, I always make work that's really hard to photograph. But this was the first show that they ever had at the Hairpin Art Center. It was called Come Together, and it was all sculptors. Finally, sculptors had a space they could show stuff. Painters get all the walls. Sculptors had a nice open space. So I love the hairpin for always giving us opportunities. And then here's another piece that I did in there called Warm Memory, and I'll talk about it more later, but it really honored the space. So I went to school for art. I know that not all of us did. I went to a small school called UWGB, University of Wisconsin in Green Bay. It was great. I went there for 5.5 years. My college buddy's on the line here, Wendy Miller. She can attest to all the good times we had. And I learned all the traditional sculpting type things: wood, metal, plaster. Please excuse the pictures. They're from slides that I took, I think, in my garage with a black sheet many, many years ago. But happy to report that the metal sculpture is still around. It's no longer blue. It's a little rusted, but it survived. Here's some more experimental pieces I did. Not always so successful, but I dabbled in video a little bit for a while. And this piece was called 120 lighters. I handed out 120 lighters to different people and then kind of tracked the lives of these lighters. I was a smoker for many years, so I was always kind of intrigued by like smoking culture and sharing of lighters. So I was just kind of examining that. And then this was a large wall installation on the right here. I don't, there's like a video of me like naked and scratching myself. I don't really remember what the concept was, but I was just playing with video at the time. Um, and here is another piece I did where I was practicing my welding. So I welded 5 perfect cubes. They're beautiful. They're, steel. My professor loved them. He was totally appalled though that I covered them with fake materials. So I knew if I like made my professor uncomfortable, Davy Damkohler, who was one of the most interesting people I've ever met, I knew I was on the right track. I did show this piece in a museum in Green Bay, Wisconsin, when I was still in school. And it was the first time I ever stood behind somebody looking at my art saying, "That's not art. Why is that here?" So at the time, it poked me a little bit, made me a little sad, but, I've learned how to defend myself now. Here's another piece I did around the same time. Paper mache goes way back. I love paper mache, and I love bright colors on it. These are some old hair rollers that I sewed together and then kind of built this crusty shell around them. Here's where I started to get into beeswax more. I learned about encaustic painting, but I started to introduce it into my artwork. And I had all these I had this packet of crushed crackers in my pocket. So it inspired me and it made this really beautiful shape. So I bought a box of crackers and crushed them all up and made a sculpture with them. Here's some other experiments I did in college. I liked playing with translucency and shadow. So building some things with airline hanger. And then also this, where I made a thing called disposable thoughts, where it was inviting the audience in to take a single fold towel, read it, crumple it up and throw it away. Just kind of. And then another piece where I worked with toilet paper, wrapping it in wire, dyeing it with teas and different stuff, just playing with like rusty levels. Cigarettes again. I think I found this on the ground and shellacked it. And then this piece, I used to play with making like these little pods of like latex paint, because you know how like at the bottom of the paint it's always kind of crusty. So I would make like little paintings, and this one I just put a lot of nails in it. So one of the cool things about my college, even though it was just a state school, I mean, nobody famous has ever gone there, was that we were a sister school to Documenta. If you don't know what Documenta is, it's an art show that happens in Kassel, Germany every 5 years, and it brings the best of the best artists and sculptors and innovators to show their work. So I get to do my internship there that summer. got a scholarship to do it since they were a sister city with us. So I got to really learn a lot and get out of my comfort zone and see what was really going on in the art world. Some of my favorite sculptors. My favorite of all time is Eva Hesse. She was a minimalist sculpture. She worked at the same time as like Donald Judd and all of those guys who are real famous. But she kind of did more of an anti-form minimalist sculpture, experimenting with latexes and strings, all the fun stuff. Joseph Beuys, I always loved the performance, the myth, and then his ideas that everybody is a sculptor, and social sculpture is something that really is important to me. And then also Inka Shonibari. He is so hilarious. I recently watched an interview with him on the School of the Art Institute. And man, I'll never forget the first time I ever saw his work, where he has like this really funny way of talking about capitalism and colonialism and all of these isms in a really funny way. Some of my mentors. My grandma is one of my biggest mentors. I just wanted to mention my grandma because she taught me how to paint. She really loved photography. We've traveled to DC together to go to the Smithsonian. And then also my grandpa Louis, he was a carpenter in the Navy and was always fixing things. And I spent a lot of time with them when I was a kid. They took care of me quite a bit. And this painting on the right here, my grandma just painted for me. She's 93 years old. She gave it to me last month, and it's the last bouquet from my mom's garden when she passed away this summer. Some of my other mentors are Mary Ellen Croto, which many of you might know. She's was a local Chicago artist who built these amazing things out of bottle caps. She was a wicked feminist, and she just had a lot of moxie. And if you know her, you know her. And then on the right is Norbert Cox, who Wendy knows very well too, but he was my sculpting mentor in college. He's a visionary kind of outsider artist, and he ran our sculpting studio. He was great. He never, sometimes in sculpture, like I was always the only woman in shop class and all the other studios. So he always made me feel comfortable welding, forging, um, constructing. He always gave me confidence, and I learned a lot of skills from him. He's a great artist. Definitely check him out. He's got some really wild stuff. Travel is a big inspiration for me. In 2004, after I was done with college, I really didn't know what to do. I was working in an architecture firm, you know, print shop, doing the reception desk, all of those things. But I just didn't want to live in Green Bay anymore. So I took off with a friend and we traveled around the world for a year. And I ended up in Australia for a while, and I stayed at this butter factory. Met this really cool guy named Rowan, who was a junk picker, had a little organic farm. And I stayed there for 4 weeks and did installations in his space. It's a little cafe. So it was a cool place to hang out. Lots of engineers, artists, movie producers, all kinds of crazy people from Sydney came out there. It was real fun. I also love camping. And in Baja California is one of my favorite places to go. The last time I went camping there, I took this little pillbox with me, and I took a picture at morning, noon, evening, and bedtime, and then took a little piece of earth or flower or wherever I was and created this little piece that I keep up on my wall. remind me of Baja. Making money. I don't really sell my work. My work isn't always sellable. So I've kind of made my living as being an administrative assistant for architects. For the most part, I've done some other freelance stuff working in galleries and nonprofits like the Chicago Community Trust, but I really love working with designers. And I have had some really good opportunities to bring art into the offices that I work at. When I worked at RTKL Associates, for about 5 years, I brought artists in and we did all kinds of installations. I gave people their first art shows and I actually had a budget for people. I was able to negotiate that, which was pretty cool. There I was also the materials librarian, so you can kind of see my library in the back here. So I got to learn a lot about architectural materials and it just, plays into my love of material as a sculptor. And they let us do all kinds of different installations for different branding. It was great. And I love working with designers. We get to do some fun things. We created some really great exhibits. I also get to help with design work sometimes, which is fun, mostly with competitions though. This is a competition that I really enjoyed, was for the bus rapid transit system. Um, they were going to build it here in Chicago. It was going to go down Western Avenue and Ashland Avenue. It never really happened, but we did submit this and got an honorable mention for the design. Also, I worked on this project, which was really awesome, and it won a Living Building Challenge Award, which is really hard to do. Unfortunately, it's not built, but it's a floating greenhouse that collects polluted water, cleans it through a natural process, supports an aquaponic growing greenhouse, and then floats to different communities. And this was set up for kind of the Snohomish area north of Seattle. And also construction. It's something that architects and designers do every year, which I love, and it's super nerdy. We build sculptures out of cans, but it's so much fun. I haven't done it in a few years, haven't found a team, but I did set the world record with my team for the largest canned food sculpture with the John Deere client many years ago, and it was super cool. We had 500 volunteers over a whole week. I didn't sleep at all, but it was all worth it. And community. Community is a big part of my art. From 2010 to 2012, I was part of the Chicago Art Department. We did a lot of exhibits. I had some studio space. And also I got to learn about teaching workshops. Something I had never done before, but always had wanted to do. And we took over teaching the art classes at a school that didn't have art classes. Did that for a couple of years and I loved it. It was fantastic. Chicago Art Department's still around. They do some really rad stuff, so check them out if you're ever in Pilsen. Another community piece that I did was ComEd commissioned me to, and a whole bunch of other artists for this refrigerator recycling program they had. And I created this public piece that was on Michigan Avenue. Doing public work, I don't know if you've ever done it, but it got kind of destroyed over Lollapalooza, which was kind of sad. But it was a really fun piece, whereas this refrigerator had a little bike pedal that you could turn and hand crank, and it allowed this little city scene, suburbs, and rural area kind of to all light up. So I was talking about the electricity and how we're all connected through the power grid. And then there's this little herb garden in the freezer compartment. It was fun making the little diorama. It was the first time I really dove into model making and used all recycled materials. Here's a piece that I did with Pei, who's also on this call, and my friend Stacy Peterson. We did it at Art and Armitage, Mary Ellen Croto's old studio space where she invited people to do things in the window. And it's called Nebulous Connections. And we took these little tiny nuts and we weaved them together in these long strips and then built these large clouds. And they're modular. I have them. They fold down so you can pop them up. They're these big, beautiful, floaty clouds. It was really hard to take pictures at Mary Ellen's, so this is the best one that I have. It's a really tiny, skinny space and could really only shoot it from outside. And then, as Tracy mentioned earlier, art in the park. I love art in the park. It's so fun. I've been helping out for about 5 years now. It's a huge community gathering that happens in Logan Square at Unity Park every July. And since I've been involved with it, AnySquared's been involved with it for years. And since I've been involved with it, I've been bringing more of a theme to it. And one year we did the theme of gentrification and home, and we built our own whole neighborhood. And that was a really fun one. One year we celebrated the Special Olympics. Another year we talked about plastics and recycling. Here's Tatiana painting a little library. And if you recognize this piece here, I was hoping Robert would be here tonight, but this is a piece that Robert made in honor of his late husband, John Pennycuff. And if any of you know, they did build some affordable housing down the street in his honor. So I kind of hope that this little project kind of inspired some of that. All right, so I've done a lot of assemblage work. For me, it's kind of like doing collage in the 3D. Helps me think and work with materials. Here are some older ones from probably 2012. And you'll still see some of these pieces. Like actually, I just cast this little hot water bottle. I cast it out of plaster recently. So I do keep things for a long time and recycle even bits from old work. But this was an interesting series. I think I was going through some rough breakup at the time. So I don't want to read into the materials too much, but it was a fun whole batch of assemblages that I did because I often work in spurts. Since I do work a full-time job, often I'll take a week off of work and like do a whole bunch of work. And whenever I can find some space or time to hang things up, I try to take advantage of it. Here's a close-up of another piece. And when I was going through this, I noticed this is when I started to do these little modular pieces with pills. So this dates back to 2012. I think I still have it on my shelf over there. Little guy. Another larger piece that I did, some detail shots of it. Yeah, I still use this pink piece. I'm actually casting a mold of that as well. Oh, interesting. Here's a piece I did in the alley. Sometimes I will just go clean up my alley and make art out of it. I live in an interesting alley with all kinds of stuff in industry and flowers. Just kind of like sketching for me. Here's some other more recent assemblages that I've worked on, which are starting to get me to move into including the figure more in my work. And which is kind of a big move for me. I shied away from figurative stuff. When I was younger, somebody told me I was really bad at it. So I always just was like, oh, I can't draw people. I can't do stuff. But it turns out I can. Just need to practice, right? All right. So projects. Sometimes, like I said, I work on something for a while and do things in spurts. And then sometimes I have themes that I work on for a while. And time is a theme that I worked on back in 2010, 2012. So when I'm working on a project like this, I was kind of inspired by the material. Um, I was on Craigslist. Some guy in Lombard had thousands of clock hands. And I was like, what? So I went out there and bought all these clock hands from him for like 20 bucks, right? Um, and so I started to think about what these clock hands mean, how cool they are, and I started to do some installations with them. And also at the time, starting to read about time and learning about how it's not really linear and it's kind of a man-made thing, and all the Stephen Hawking's theories about it, and other physics. So for me, it was really fun to kind of explore it in different spaces and conceptually. And when I do work like this, it's really tedious and there's lots of hours involved in it. So it's kind of meditative. So just kind of meditating on time and changing my perspective on it. And this is one of the last iterations that I did. This is from the Hairpin Art Center, if anybody can recognize it. It's back before the bioswale was built, way before Crown Liquors. But yeah, Fireflies is another project series that I did for about 4 years. So I captured the light of fireflies as humanely as possible. Yeah, a few of them probably died in the process, but they don't have very long lifespans, and I was gentle with them. But I let them do their thing. I would catch them. They usually come out around 4th of July. So every year for around 4th of July, I would catch them in a big jar. Or sometimes I had little jars, so they had their own apartments. And then I would bring them into a dark room situation and let them drop their light on the the light sensitive paper and develop them and see what happened. So it was fun to do for a few years. Got to learn more about fireflies, the differences between the male and the female, like these big bright lights. Those are going to be a male, and the little tiny lights are good. Wait, no, that's backwards. The really bright ones are the females because they sit in the kind of the grass, and they send off a signal, a strong signal to attract the male to them. So really their lighting is about mating. So I captured that for about 4 or 5 years. It was really fun. I did this tulip project. I love tulips. My grandma is Dutch. Grew up with a lot of tulip ephemera around the house. At the time, I moved to North and Western, kind of the edge of Wicker Park, and it was the closest I had ever lived. Actually, the only time I've ever lived east of Western. Um, but I noticed that, like, all the houses over there were established and big and beautiful, and they all had tulips. So to me, it was this indicator. It's like, yeah, when people have roots and they're planted, like they have tulips. So one season, I used to walk my sister's dog around this route here, and I would gather all the tulips, only as they fell off the tulip. I wouldn't like pick anybody's tulips from their yard. And then I'd bring them home and I'd dip them in beeswax. And then I ended up sewing them all together and making this large, expansive piece out of them. Um, and it's held up okay over the years. They do lose a little bit of their color, but it's still hanging in there. And then house home is another theme that I've worked quite a bit on over the years. It's back in 2010. I started, no, was it 2000? Maybe it was 2010. Sorry, time warp sometimes. I started to think about all the places I've lived. I was moving in with somebody, and they had a very different home life experience than I did. So it caused me to examine it a little more. So a lot of people like grow up in one home their whole life, or maybe move around a little bit. But I've moved 29 times in my life. So I went around and I started taking pictures of all the homes I lived in. This is them chronologically up to 25. And then, I started to think about like um, why it was different. I grew up a little more poor, lived in affordable housing situations, lived with family. And then around 8 here, when I was about 11 years old, my mom married a sailor and the Gulf War happened. So we got called back into the military. So I ended up moving to Spain for 3 years when I was a teenager, and then coming back to the States and going to college and living in Chicago. I just moved around a lot. And I've recreated all the floor plans from memory, which just kind of was a real fun exercise to do. I also started building models of all of them. And I've got a couple that are finished, but I've kind of ran out of steam of doing 29 of them. So on to other projects. And during this is when I started to get involved with activism in the neighborhood around housing. Everybody who lives around here knows, Fishman is one of the biggest landlords, and it's a bit of a slumlord, as we all know. Um, and yeah, so I got involved with some of the big protests that were happening. I don't know if you remember, this was a polar vortex, 2014, I think. 300 people were being evicted from their homes in the middle of the polar vortex. It's crazy. 3 buildings of people. So I created a piece of art for the Logan's, I think it was the Logan Square
It
Art
was the
Festival?
Milwaukee Avenue Arts Fest, and they changed
Oh,
the
yes.
Logan Square Arts Fest because they got bad press.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Tracy. Um, yeah, which I know hits some sore points in the neighborhood, but anyways, I did this project for the Milwaukee Avenue Arts Festival, and it called out Mark Fishman for being a bad landlord. And I thought I was just going to be, standing in there talking about affordable housing all day. Because when I did, get this installation space for this arts festival, I found out this is the building right here that I was doing my art installation in. I think it was this window. They were evicting people from this building at the same time. So there was this nonprofit organization set up called I Am Logan Square that kind of usurped the Milwaukee Avenue Arts Festival for the gain of Mark Fishman, who was behind it all. So a developer was using artists for gentrification. So I know I'm a white female artist. I went to school. I have a lot of privilege. And we're often blamed for the destruction of neighborhoods. But really, sometimes as artists, we can be pawns. And at this art festival, my artwork got removed from it and caused a little bit of controversy. And now that group no longer exists. And now that art festival no longer has that name. And I'm sure Tracy has a lot to say about that as well in the Q&A. I've also got involved a little more with those ugly towers outside of AnySquared that were being built. We tried to shut down the construction of those. Yeah, so the fight goes on. Another installation that I did, kind of expounding off of that idea of house and home, was Warm Memory. And this is at the Hairpin Art Center. And it's kind of that shape of a home. and you could walk right into it. It was about 35 feet long, and it was just a really fun piece to build. It was a collaboration. I had hired a friend to build a model of it, help me with the structure so it wouldn't fall. Had a lot of friends come and help me get all the string. I kind of spun it and did it in place. It was kind of like being a spider. It was fun for a week. A lot of cool things happened in it while it was up at the Hairpin Art Center. I think this is Angel Spit, if anybody knows him. He hangs out at Comfort Station, meditating in it one night. There were lots of music performances, fun things that happened there. But one of the greatest things about this piece for me was that everybody shared memories of their home, of the changing neighborhood. Because as you know, the Hairpin Art Center is right in the middle of it all, where Logan Square is changing and families are getting pushed out. But you know, as someone who has moved 29 times, you know, it's not always about the house. It's about, you know, what's inside, the memories you have, um, that psychological safety that you can have um, by being whole and loving yourself and having support around you, whether it's family, whether it's your arts community. Um, you know, it's all very important stuff. And then I'm gonna start talking about some residencies. This is a residency I did at Grace Church in Logan Square, which some of you might know I'm an atheist. I'm not religiously affiliated, but Grace Church is a really rad church. They invited me in kind of after the controversy of the piece at the Milwaukee Avenue Arts Festival. A lot of people invited me in, and I guess kind of talking about that a little bit more. My community changed after that happened. A lot of people I was friends with that were a little in the gallery scene, or you know, maybe like more trust funded typical artists, didn't want to be associated with me anymore. But I made a whole lot of other friends, then including at Grace Church. Um, a lot of, you know, interesting people who I wouldn't normally engage with because I don't go to their church. But this is Pastor Mark. He invited me in for residency for 3 months. I did some community activist work there. We held a whole bunch of talks about gentrification. We invited tons of people in to share information to the community. But I also did an art project while I was there. I took portraits of everybody in the church. And I also found a whole archive of old photos in the church, and I kind of meshed them together. And if you can see up close here, you can see them in the stained glass windows. So if I go back, I created this installation on some old stained glass windows in one of their meeting rooms. And if you look really closely at it, like you can see an old choir kind of mashed up with some of the new children who go there, or it's just kind of this beautiful collage that you really need to experience in person to kind of feel that, you know, church is made up of its people. And at the time they were going through a bit of a crisis of they should close their church or not. You know, and just kind of, it was nice to be there and create this project with them to remind them that it's about them and their community, not always so much the space. But as some of you might know, an anonymous donor came in and they've joined forces with another church. So they'll be staying in the neighborhood. And I think they have some sort of residency program still going on. So check them out. And then I did a really great residency in Ketchikan, Alaska at the Arts and Humanities Council there. I traveled with my art supplies I took this gigantic suitcase I bought at Sears and filled it with stuff, and just went and made art for about 10 days. To warm up, I made a bunch of collages. I had this old book about Alaska, and it's this very like 1950s white man going to Alaska, taking all the resources, kind of, this very macho kind of book, like this is what Alaska is, which there's some elements to it. And I'm not an expert on Alaska by any means. But I would say this book was a misrepresentation. So it was fun to collage. There were all kinds of crazy like illustrations in it. Um, collage is a good way to kind of warm up your brain. And then seaweed. I love seaweed. When I was out there in 2015, let me see if I have a picture of it. Here, this is a picture from 2015, and I couldn't stop thinking about how when seaweed dries, when the tide goes out, and it creates these little like shelters for creatures. So I was excited to go back and experiment. So gathered a ton of seaweed. Luckily, there were some ultra low tides at the time. I was able to get all different types. The whole gallery smelled like low tide and was really stinky the whole time I was there. So it's kind of funny. But my hosts were amazing there. Cameo, who's on the call, she was one of them, and some of her colleagues there. It was great. One of the best 10 days of my life. Did some collaging, got some seaweed, visited some really great like garage sales. You can buy a gun at a garage sale in Alaska. Got a little Target here, but I really love fluorescent stuff. And there's a lot of fluorescent like fishing stuff. So there's a lot of good material there. So like my palette for these collages was that, muted seaweed, kind of rust, because everything's kind of rusty and salty, and then all these like pops of neon. While I was there, I also did a little photo project, which is kind of hard to see here. But I got one of those little tiny printers, little travel printers with like the sticker printers. You can just take a picture on your iPhone and print it out. And Ketchikan Island has about 30 miles of road. So if you see this little map down here, this is kind of what the edge of the island looks like and what the road follows. So I stopped at a point and kind of all along the 31 miles of it and took pictures, kind of arranged it in the same shape. Just kind of a photo collage, like capturing this one entire road, the only road. Well, I shouldn't say the only road, there's other side roads, but the main road of the whole island. And here's some more seaweed experiments. I brought beeswax because I love beeswax and it's good preservation. And it's also a really great adhesive if you want to look at like naturally ways of binding things together. And then kind of some explorations that are a little more on the architectural side. Like I said, I was really excited about how it dries and kind of stretches over things. And I still have the piece here, actually, and it's kind of crusty and dried up now. And I've tried to like re-wet it, but it just really hasn't stayed. It hasn't kept that vibrant green that it once had. Excuse me. And the last residency that I did was called Core, and it was back at the Chicago Art Department. They got a grant a couple of years ago, it's 2019, to invite a bunch of artists in to do different types of projects. And they invited me as an alumni. Well, I applied and I was accepted with all these really rad people. Like I felt out of place. like with Sam Kirk, Tara Betts. Yeah, it was crazy, but it was really fun. Got to know some really cool people and work on some fun projects down in Pilsen. So there were two things that I wanted to accomplish in my residency. One was starting to do more mold making so I can make multiples of my work, which I'll talk about more later. But also I wanted to do a fun project. Like I had a space, I could make some stuff. Like what could I do? And I started to think about all the fun candies that are made in Chicago area, all the things that are bad for you, but like little modules, right? Like I showed those little pills that I started to glue together, which I still do. Got a whole bunch right here. But that modularity, right? When things come from a factory, they're all the same. So we've got Nabisco, we've got Ferrera Pan, and then we have Schultz. Schultz was the first place that made sliced white bread. So this is down in Garfield Park. Ferrera Pan is a candy place. They make lemon heads, cherry heads, all those types of things. It's out in off the west side blue line, Berwyn, maybe. And then Nabisco is down, I think, back of the yards, a little further south. And they make Oreos there, or they used to make Oreos there. They actually shipped them off they're made in Mexico now, but you get the drift. So I made sculptures out of Oreos. And this one was about 400 Oreos together, kind of like this beehive kind of shape. Beeswax again, and then like a little platform on the inside to kind of hold it together. But we did a public dunking of them, which was really fun. I think some of you were there who are on this call. There's something about the spectacle of it, that like, who doesn't love to dunk a cookie in milk and then eat it? But like with a crowd of people, there's over 100 people there, like dunking all these. It was really fun. There's a video on my website if we want to watch it later. And then I made a little toaster, just kind of honoring the white bread made at Schultz Bakery at one time. But it was actually in a frame. Sorry, I don't have a very good picture of it. And it had a little like battery pack that we hooked jumper cables up to. And all these wires in here heated up and toasted the bread. Excuse me. Excuse me, I got a dry mouth. And then this piece is cherry heads from Ferrera Pan, and I made this large sculpture out of them and just let it melt for hours. All of these pieces, it was hard to get rid of them, but it was, kind of about the impermanence of it all, how things change. Neighborhoods are built up around these companies who are making horrible things, but they also created a middle class. And then, it's kind of thinking about all that stuff that's rolled up into these nostalgic childhood goodies. And working with sugar, I definitely suggest wearing gloves and long sleeves. I got real hivey and itchy. And wood glue works really good with candy. It makes like a whole different material. So one of the other things I was doing with that residency was figuring out like, how can I sell some art? Clearly, I don't really make art that sells or very easily. And I don't always want to be an administrative assistant. So I've been thinking about that a lot and working towards, a goal of, being a self-sufficient artist, whatever that means. So like I said, with sculpture, I've been getting back into ceramics because I'm finding that it'll be a way that I can make objects at all different price points to sell. And I really like it. Now that I'm older and I have patience, I really, really enjoy clay. It's not something I would have enjoyed 20 years ago. I used to get frustrated because things would blow up in the kiln or didn't have the tensile strength I wanted. But I also had, a lot of fears about doing figurative work because, like I said earlier, I wasn't good at it and I didn't put enough practice into it because, sometimes when you're younger and someone tells you're bad at something, you kind of shy away and do other things. So I've come back to it. And look, I've made my feet, my hands. I've also done some other sculptures, which finished ones are on my shelves. And I really have grown in a lot of confidence. Um, and, I'm in my 40s. We are all still growing and learning and doing things. I also like to make little fun things. I have a lot of animals and I've got a 3-legged cat, so I made this winter. When the pandemic first hit, I didn't want to make any art. I was just sad. I just made that flower bud installation that people could go into. And I just was like, really? Now I made a piece of art that people go into and they're probably breathing on each other in it and getting COVID. Like, I don't know. So this winter, I resolved to make fun things and took some hand building classes where I can make a little cat and still work on my skills and experiment. So I've been making molds. I don't know if anybody saw, or maybe you received some cards from me around the New Year's where I made some oranges, like a whole series of them, just to, do some iteration and repetition in different styles. But I also made a mold of it. So I'm making like little tiny, tiny oranges. But clay, it humbles you. It breaks. You can fix it sometimes, but it's good. It's good. I've also been making these little tender moments. My grandma gave me that painting, so I gave her these 2 little turtles in a dish. It's a little baby turtle and a mama turtle. Just working on different hand building techniques. Now I'm working on this one right now. It's a big loris, which a loris is a venomous primate, and it's like looking over a little city. But just kind of having some fun and just working on my skills with making sure this comes out as one piece from the kiln. I'm also working on a series of Neti Pots, and I know that some of you are probably still waiting for yours. I've been working on this prototype for about 2 years now. On the 4th iteration of it, I had to be persistent. Like, I love the shape of this little guy, but it didn't have the volume that's needed. So I've been working on scaling it up. And I have a new mold that is from this clay guy in the back here that is drying right now. And it should be one that I can send out to have people test for me. So it will be nice to have, I'm starting to work on some objects that I feel comfortable selling that have a purpose. So a little bit of functionality, but also sculptural. I have a neti pot from Walgreens and it's the ugliest thing. And it sits on my shelf for 3 months in the winter. Like, I would rather have a little sculptural piece that's going to sit in my bathroom. So been working on those types of projects. And I think that's it, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thanks for the talk, Amie. It was great. It was great. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for listening.
And right now, we're going to open it up if anyone has any questions for Amie about different works of hers or how she works or the types of materials she uses.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Who has a question?
I had a curiosity about the baby turtle artwork. I just wanted to see more about that. I don't know.
What did you say? Baby turtle artwork?
Baby turtle.
The baby turtle. It was just a fun little sketch that I had in my notebook. This winter, I was trying to think about tender moments. And I'm not usually a woman who thinks about things like that, like these moments where like the young and the old kind of come together and share wisdom. And turtles, in as many of you might know, are symbolic of wisdom in many cultures. Think of them as carrying knowledge or the earth. There's a lot of creation stories that are born from turtles. And I was just thinking about, like the knowledge that we pass on and, well, going through grief as well. So my mother passed away and I'm, still dealing with that. And that was just one of those sculptures that kind of honors that.
Can I see it again? Is that the one?
Oh no, this is the butter dish. I was like,
Oh, my butter dish. Do you want me to share some pictures?
yeah, share that
You could
picture.
share the
Yeah,
picture of that one.
yeah.
But that's pretty cool.
Oh.
There's hands up.
I raised my hand. So when you apply for galleries or grants or art spaces to
Residency.
do, yes, what would you think? What are things that are important things to put in or about in the application?
In the application, man, I really think you need to be true to yourself in it. When I write applications, I usually like kind of read it and then I'll do like a draft of like what I want to do, especially if I'm doing some sort of project. Like if I'm exploring something or want to do something of scale that I haven't done before, I make sure I sit down and I write from my heart. Like this is what I want to do and try to be succinct and, purposeful about it. I'll also pull out the sketchbook and make sketches. It's important to be able to convey your ideas visually. Let me go back.
I wanted to ask, do you think the thing matters whether something is short when you explain your work in a short rather than a long way?
I mean, from my point of view, I would say from short, right? If you can say what you mean in a couple paragraphs, one paragraph, do it. But also having pictures. Sorry, let me scroll back further. Oh, it's way at the beginning. But I definitely think that if you're proposing anything that's going to be hard for somebody to visualize with just words or paragraph, you need to draw them a picture.
Next
Here, right? Like I drew a picture to be part of lip. I didn't know, I mean, I kind of knew I was going to pull this off, but I drew a photo to explain my idea. Right?
Amy, you can't see it. I don't know what happened if it's just frozen. All we see is the first slide you came up with.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you hear it now?
It was
Here it is. Can you see it now?
Yes.
so there's
Okay.
and your diagram, even though we didn't see the real thing, is why we chose it for lip. Yeah.
Yeah, so instead of, writing a paragraph, I was able to show you, and it's actually was easier for me to like draw a picture and be like, this is what I want to do. And then I did little mock-ups at home and had a materials palette. So if you don't have like all your stuff done, like you usually don't with installation work, put together your materials palette, take shots of it, and then, include, maybe a piece that you have that's similar in style or something with your submission. I don't think verbally it's hard to convey art sometimes. I don't know. I struggle with it. I don't know all the language. I don't have an MFA. I don't know. So I just speak from my heart.
So does anyone else have any questions?
In the background.
So
Yeah, because I think that
hi. So
Hello.
with how much you moved around, you explained that you moved 29 times, and being a sculptor,
Uh-huh.
How do you, my brain automatically is like, how do you manage all that? Like, I'm a painter and I constructed a lot of panels and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck to do with them.
I make a lot of my work is modular.
Okay.
Like this piece here, it like all these little clouds, I have them in a Rubbermaid downstairs. They just all kind of collapse. So as a sculptor, I've really had to, because I don't have access to like a metal studio or a wood shop or large space like any of you. So I've just learned to be more modular and to make things that aren't always permanent, like the candy sculptures. Like they attracted moths and I had to like throw it out. So, so letting go of things is a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, probably moving 29 times now. No.
Yeah, I'm a master packer if anybody ever needs help.
Yes.
You are.
and also one thing for AnySquared community is I'm really good at driving U-Hauls and I'm happy to rent one anytime and like help you install a show. Nothing more I love than that. So text me.
Oh, Brian has a question, and then
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for showing all your work because I feel like I've known you for a while and I haven't really seen all this work. So like,
Mhm.
it really was on another level to see all your work. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. My question. Oh, U-Hauls. Well, that's another thing. I was gonna ask. What I was gonna ask was, speaking of turtles, because you talked about turtles, and like bringing it kind of like the bridge between the old and the new. I wanted to talk to you about like what is some advice that you can give like younger artists that are like trying to make it in art or like like struggling with like creative, what do you call it, creative blocks, like what it.
Yeah.
I feel like all your work is so versatile. You've done so much
Yeah.
stuff, and being a sculptor is like it really requires you to think about space and just in so much different levels than just 2D. So I like really just wanted to know like what is some advice that you could give us all.
Well, my one advice is always practice. Like always have a practice, even if you're not feeling creative. I've gone through large dry spells where I don't feel creative, and it sucks. And they're mainly when I've been trying to create art to sell. Like, and I know that we have to like find that balance. And I've been able to find a balance by having a full-time job as administrative assistant, but I'm adjacent and working with creative people and designers. So I'm always thinking about stuff and I'm always learning to help my art practice, right? Being able to create a diagram or all of those things I credit to working around architects to be able to visually convey my idea. So I really think that finding something that's going to, allow you to do what's in your heart. So I had to compromise. Like I really wanted to work in art galleries and museums and do stuff, and I applied for every job, but I got turned down. There's so much rejection in art. Like you just kind of get, I don't want to say you get used to it, but you get better every time. And you just have to keep putting yourself out there, but also keep practicing. And be open to different opportunities.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
I'm gonna put my 2 cents on that, Brian. You gotta make sure that you stay active as much as possible because one thing that people are gonna notice that you're gonna be out there all the time doing whatever you need to do as an artist, whether you're making small little things or big things. As long as you keep on moving and moving and moving and still be present, even though you might have a dry spell, there's always something gonna pop out and your name is gonna come out because you've been exposed to the cultural events, and people are gonna remember you because you were there, or something that you did, or something that took people's minds in order to be like, oh boy, remember this guy? And it happens to a lot of us. I mean, I haven't done for the last 3 years. I done like a couple little things, but my name keeps on popping every year, and I haven't done much in the last 3 years. So you just gotta keep on doing whatever you need to be doing.
Mhm. Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
definitely right.
Think so.
Does anyone else have questions in the room on the, oh, Jackie.
So you spoke about
Oh, hey, Jackie. I
love-
love your spider pieces. I haven't seen you in a long time.
I've kind of been keeping my head down, just how life is.
Yeah.
You spoke of impermanence and how things fall apart, specifically with the candy sculptures. Well, two parts. One, how long is the longest like temporal installation that you have either done or thought of? And actually, no, that's both parts. How long is, and like, how would you do that? Because like some of the, because like especially with like residencies, like a big obstacle of sculptures that I want to make is A, they're caustic and dangerous, and B, just
It's part of sculpture.
just
Safety first.
I haven't. Yeah. Also I need a fume hood, so that's another reason why I've been.
Yeah.
Is just like the extreme length of time that the temporal installations like would require to like fully go about. And so how would you? Have you done any other like shifting sculptures like the candy one before? And can you speak to that?
Yeah, I have. I've done a lot of temporary things. A lot of my time installations were as well. They were kind of in place and site specific, a lot of them. But what I do is I know like when I apply or I know I'm going to be needing a large space to do something, first I find myself in situations like being part of the Chicago Art Department or reaching out to the Hairpin Art Center, places like that. It's good to build relationships with. Sometimes when you do one piece there and they know that you followed through with it, like you built everything you said you were going to build, you clean up after yourself, you scrape the paint, you paint the walls, and you make it better than when you went in, they'll invite you back.
Yes.
Right. And that's how I've built a relationship with Hairpin. So then I can do those temporary things. They know that, and I know now that, okay, I'm going to need a full solid week of 16-hour days to finish this, right? I need to build that in because you need time to install and create. Always multiply it times 3. Like you think you're going to need 16 hours, you're really going to need like 60 hours to do it. So like understanding time planning and time management when you're requesting space from somebody, and then giving yourself the space to create something and then allowing it to just be there in a temporary way. It can be kind of a roller coaster of emotions because you're excited and you're making something and then you're like, I'm putting all this work into something and it's just going to go away. But then there's something really exhilarating about like smashing it all down when it's done or whatever it is, or dunking a bunch of Oreos with an audience, right? Like doing something. And I think I've found that making sure like there's experiences that happen with those pieces, like the warm memory one where people could go inside of it and like we could talk and kids would run through it and run their hands on it. And then we shared stories and like just talking to people and being there with them. Like I really got to enjoy the sculpture that way, and it will always be, part of my more memory from it. So, just kind of having a different relationship with it than art just being an object, which, I've kind of always struggled with.
Thank you for your answer.
Thanks.
I've always loved the fact that many of your pieces, you have some kind of community involvement in them in some way. And that has been, very attractive for me as an artist looking at your work. So.
Yeah, no, I love it. I've definitely started baking that in.
Can I add something? I don't think you can see me because of the light in the house now, but hold on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
so far away in Alaska. To the question for talking about Amie and being an artist, and one of the things that I want to say that I learned from living with her and being a friend, and watching her work, that I it has taken me well over 10 years that we've been friends, or almost 20 years now, is like Amie has always treated herself as an artist. She has always treated herself with the integrity of an artist. And I have finally kind of learned how to do that within myself. And I've always admired that, even if she was playing around with Oreos or tiny pieces of rock or tinfoil or something, it was always in the spirit of creation. And I always felt like if I was learning how to embroider or learning how to sew or trying to do macrame or trying to build things, I was always, oh, I'm just messing around with this, or oh, it's just something weird, it's not anything. And Amie always treats what she does in honor of her art, and treats herself like an artist. And I think that as I started to sort of find the thing that I feel is my art, and I started to treat it like art because I'm an artist, I kind of had to reflect on and living with Amie and watching her do that on a daily basis. And so I always credit Amie as the person that sort of taught me how to see art and see myself as an artist. And so my advice is to just even if you think you're messing with something, or even if you're doing a medium that you've never touched before, or you're just, drawing in the sand with a stick, treating yourself like an artist and treating it as part of your process, it will help you with that confidence. And I learned that from Amie. So Blair.
Aw, thank you. That's sweet.
Can I add to that? I'm Amy's other roommate. And when she said be open to opportunities, Amie has always been open to opportunities. Perfect example, I was on my way to dinner with my friend who was gay, and we passed a small protest for gay rights. And I called her and I'm like, oh, there's a protest going on. And we walked on the way home, and there's Amie, that she had made a sign and she was down there in the action. I mean, all within an hour, she had everything put together. And it's just her thought process of processes. She's always working with new materials. And if she sees an opportunity, she grabs it. She doesn't miss out on anything. And I have always admired you for that.
Oh, thanks, Wendy.
Mm-hmm.
I've always admired you for your endless support. Always showing up.
Not going anywhere.
So does anyone have any extra questions that you haven't been able to? Oh, Saul.
Yes.
He's been waiting.
I really love your sculpture pieces, installation pieces that are hanging from the ceiling. When you were talking about it, the one that you showed previously a couple of times a minute ago, kind of remind me of a piece that I did at the Art Institute of Chicago at Gallery 2. And I'm just find it so amazing that we all as artists, we find this cocoon within our sculptural pieces. Do you see that happen often in your sculptures?
Yeah, I think I've been moving towards that, right? Things that people can go inside, you feel contained, it's about that experience. And I'm hoping to figure out how to continue doing that after COVID.
Yeah, that was the saddest part about the gallery at the Hairpin. We did have some gallery hours in June. After it was closed down for a couple months, because it actually was supposed to be in March, and we had our opening and people got to go in it on the opening, but people didn't really utilize that sculpture in the same way during COVID because it was in space. And yeah, it is something to think about.
Yeah, it was funny, that little that bud installation. Well, it wasn't that little, but like being inside of it and it had all that foil in it. It was hot inside of it. I didn't really think about that, but it was kind of fun because it created another sensation when you were in it where you got real hot and then the light on and off, and it was real fun. But yeah, I have to figure out other ways. I'm always wanting to incorporate different technologies, and like wireless technology has gotten so great. So I think that's that's something to look forward to. Like the lights that turn on and off, I bought them at IKEA. It's not like it's
Those are
super
awesome.
expensive. Yeah.
Those are awesome. So does anyone have any more questions? Because we're going to start wrapping up. Last call for questions, everyone.
Well, thank you for everybody hanging in there. I didn't realize I talked for almost an hour.
It was a great talk. Don't
Thank
worry.
you.
It was wonderful.
All right.
Very engaging, and I'm so happy you did that. Does anyone have any questions? So we're going to wrap it up, and thank you.
All right.
It was a wonderful talk.
Thank you, Tracy.
For doing this, and it's more exciting to have these talks during studio day because everyone comes in and out, and then everyone kind of chimes in, and it's kind of been a little hectic but good. It's a different format for me doing our talks, so
it's fun.
We'll see you later. So
all right, thank you for all that you do. I appreciate it.
People outside.
All right, nice to see you, Cameo. So
check social media for future Zooms and future streams.